Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for joining us. You're watching our weekly program, Talk to OBN on OBN Horn of Africa. In this edition, we'll be discussing about G7 countries statement issued on Ethiopia and Africa. I am joining by political analyst Ayana Feyisa, live from the US. Ayana, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What's your takeaway about this statement?
Well, as an Ethiopian, it's a bit, let me say, annoying because it's not unexpected per se due to the current positioning Ethiopia is, especially with the BRICS country and all of the pressure we are used to during the Grand Renaissance Dam and our usage of waters and previous historical situations. It's expected, but not really something palatable for an Ethiopian to see such a bias. So, well, I guess we'll dig deep into it. But my general view was like not a surprise, but still a shock.
Well, Ayana, in its statement, the G7 described Somaliland as a region of Somalia, and this expression alone has caused serious condemnation from Somaliland government and citizens. What really makes Somaliland part of Somalia for the last 3 decades?
Practically, there's nothing, right? And I have spoken to this and other medias too. Practically, this country has been operating as an independent nation with, everything a nation has and is supposed to have. Somaliland hasn't. It has its own election. It's preparing for another one coming soon, and it has a good election at it, right? It could be an exemplary country for East African and Horn of Africa countries with its with how it holds its democratic elections. It has shown sovereignty and how it operated with other nations, even G7 countries. For the irony is, have been conducting business with Somaliland as if it's an entirely independent nation. It's also, understandable that Somaliland has not been internationally acknowledged, but international acknowledgement does not deem a country worthy of being a nation or not. There are other prerequisites a nation has to fulfill. Somaliland has the historical background, and it's not even a recognition, it's a re-recognition per se, right? So Somaliland has its own currency, its own constitution, its own everything that a nation has. Somaliland has it. It issues different passports from Somalia. And for the sake of courtesy, other nations have been, and the international communities and organizations have been using this term, the sovereign state or the independent state of Somaliland, saying it's a state, but part of Somalia, but in a sense, it's sovereign or it's independent. Even that is not a proper description of what Somaliland has been and how it has been operating. But it's understandable. This document, the G7 document, entirely disregards that whole background and just mentions Somaliland as if it's being administered and living under the Somali government, which is not true. But it's a political statement in my view.
Tibor Nagy, who is former United States Assistant Secretary of State for Africa and former American Foreign Service officer who served as American ambassador to Guinea and to Ethiopia, tweeted, "Unfortunately, it shows West ignorance of Horn of Africa reality by criticizing Ethiopia-Somaliland deal. So often, West takes wrong side of history and app with strategic losses. How do you see this?
Well, as an American, he's actually feeling frustrated with how the G7, which is like anything America or the United States is highly governed by the interest of the U.S. He is saying that this is against the U.S. interest, right? And I concur. The U.S. interest should be in having Ethiopia's interests respected. As we might dig deeper later on, there is the issue of piracy and immigration that the Western nations are highly concerned with. The remedy for this is having Ethiopia's interest fulfilled. Uh, and even in recognizing the African Union's collaborated effort to keep peace in Somalia, which Ethiopia is the number one provider. And we have sacrificed the lives of our children. Our young men and women have, sacrificed their lives to keep Somalia free of Al-Shabaab. And all of this credit that the Ethiopian government, Ethiopia, has provided should be indicative of what having Ethiopia get access to that sea and to that corridor means in the effort to keep terrorism, piracy, and illegal immigration at bay. So it would have been in their best interest to actually acknowledge Ethiopia's interest and also acknowledge how the Somaliland has been operating for the last 3 decades or more. So he sees that this is really not benefiting. This is a miscalculation, a misread on how the Horn of Africa operates, and I do concur.
When several US diplomats and UK members of parliament clearly push for Somaliland formal recognition as a sovereign state, and where the federal government of Somalia has no control over it over the last 3 decades, why has the seaport deal Ethiopia has made with it has concerned the G7?
It's politics is like trade. You will have to assess your losses and gains, right? And I am seeing that the G7 has felt some apprehension from how Somalia's president has acted the last few months. It's rather he was rather hot with the and frantic with his statements and all the hasty decisions of I will pull my ambassador here and push this and that. It's just it kind of put them on edge. I think they are trying to uh, keep Somalia's president somewhat satisfied with their statements. Um, to provide to not provoke him too much and make decisions that will compromise their interest. That's my read in the situation. And they felt it's affordable to offend a longtime ally in the maintenance and upholding of Somalia's peace and Horn of Africa, to offend such an ally in an effort to calm down Hassan Sheikh, who has been rather frantic with the diplomatic uh, uh, proceedings of this situation, with how in the African Union Assembly we have seen the same thing. In Italy we have seen the same thing. The statements show you that there is this feeling of urgency and apprehension that they want to calm down. But why at the expense of a diplomatic lash towards Ethiopia, who has been a major ally in the region and who still continues to contribute for Somalia's peace? That is the question. I think that the ambassador's concern about misreading is too I don't think they're going to be able to calm down Hassan Sheikh with just these things. There is an underlying situation, and that's I think that's what he means by a misread.
Members of the G7 have expressed their concern about the growing threats to the maritime security in the Horn of Africa, where the Red Sea trade route is under serious security threat from the Houthi militia in Yemen and other sea pirates. Why they fail to understand this issue is among forcing factor behind Ethiopia's quest for a seaport access. Of course, you try to touch some reasons. Can you exactly associate your answer with the security traits along the Red Sea and Ethiopia's quest?
Yeah, so let's start from, before we go to the Houthis, let's start from Al-Shabaab, right? So Hassan Sheikh would have you believe that Al-Shabaab's decline, especially within the last couple of years, comes from a chain of TV announcements and propaganda. And it just made me smirk, because that's not how Al-Shabaab works, right? It has to do with a strict contact and the closeness that Ethiopia and Somalia have, that our engagement has been a major contribution in taming down Al-Shabaab. And even on our end of the border, we have been fighting against Al-Shabaab, and we have been really eradicating its small cells all the way to the cities, including Somalia. So that is why Al-Shabaab is in the decline. And now that we are phasing out of the effort to keep Somalia, in free of Al-Shabaab, now that we are starting to pull out, I think Djibouti pulled out, we're going to be pulling out and phasing into a different level. That is why we are seeing an upsurge in Al-Shabaab. The Houthis are on the other side of the other face of this coin. Is Al-Shabaab is the other face of the coin, I believe. And whenever we have these forces, definitely anti-Western tendencies, we see this all the way into the government apparatuses. And I believe the CIA has full view of how these structures are built into the governments. If I can attest, and I can definitely attest to the Ethiopian government with all its flaws, I don't think there will be any Al-Shabaab structures building into it. That is a high quality, high mark that you cannot undermine. And that could help you if you extend it to the maritime access that Ethiopia needs. And it's also rightfully, something that the United Nations Charter allows us to ask without undermining anybody's sovereignty, any other transit nations' sovereignty. We have the right to access international waters and common heritage of humanity. And by allowing us this right, you also allow a nation that has zero compromise with Al-Shabaab or Houthi and has a history of crashing and completely devastating these terrorist cells into the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. That is an opportunity at their disposal. And just to tame down a frantic head of state, you undermine such a value. And the ambassadors' frustration, and many learned and exposed to the area, I believe, are frustrated. And you do this type of stuff, and then you go 2-3 years, and when the damage comes, there is an article: who lost Ethiopia, who did this, who did that. I think it's something they can still correct, at least with their actions. Their words have not been the best.
Before a couple of months, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been awarded by FAO Agricola Award. How do you see this paradox? I mean, it's been in Italy, and again, it's been in Italy. Was the award, this G7 meeting were there? I mean, what's your take, Ayana? I don't really get what it meant by.
Yeah. So this is just some coy to make you feel like you have offended Big Brother, right? You have made new friends, and now we're not going to recognize any of your progresses, and we're going to stress on something we see problematic, and we're going to make you jealous by um, talking, talking to somebody else as if they're doing right, and then we're going to completely I was sustainable. How many times that report says sustainable development? And we know the agenda for 2030 is completely reliant on building a sustainable. And we built the Grand Renaissance Dam and another, Koisha is, I think, underway. Nothing is more sustainable than hydroelectricity, right? So we are to the level where we can sell hydroelectricity. It's one of the most sustainable energy means. And we have planted more trees than any nation, I think, in the world within the last few years. And there's the agricola reward, and all of these things, they are within their right to not recognize these things. But is it right? No. See, if you're touching on agenda and you're seeing a clear ally and somebody who's doing above and beyond to the Paris Accord and to keeping clean. And we have electric cars in Ethiopia uh, by design and also by uh, I think there is a new rule by policy. Ethiopia is making sure that we have no fossil fuel progress, and we're trying to emit less and have all electric cars. And then, the government just brought in, I think, more than 100 vehicles that are fully electric. All of these efforts, like all of these concerted efforts to hit the goal and go above and beyond with the limited access we have to income. It's still being kept away from agua, and the World Bank and IMF still trying to depreciate and giving us all that heartache, right? But still seeing a nation that they consider poor. I don't think Ethiopia is a poor nation, striving in this direction, and you have a document that doesn't mention one of these things and recognize none of these things, it just tells me, why did you go make other friends? Why did you, involve in BRICS? Why are you entering early? So now I'm going to show you I'm not really happy. You should be only my friend and dependent upon only I. And that's how I translate it into layman's terms. Is like, I'm going to show you, I'm going to shrug my shoulders and say, I'm not going to recognize anything you do. If anything, I'm going to talk less of what your effort was to peacefully resolve a national interest, which is rightful to you and also to Somaliland. So that's how I look at it. And the politicians know how to leverage this, of course. But my take is like, that's why when I started, I said it's not surprising. I'm not surprised, but still disappointed.
Global warming and climate change is very drastic, and never appreciated the green legacy initiatives being undergone in Ethiopia. How do you see this again?
Yeah, so just like I mentioned, I think we can really stop expecting any appreciation, right? If and for me, the line was drawn during the uh, GERD, like Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and how these groups have interacted with us and labeled and all of that is a telltale sign that your full and utmost dependency is an asset. All right. So, and we cannot expect any nation, if you were a G7 nation, if we were, a very wealthy nation, and it is, the natural and the usual sense of the word, if we have all the wealth and we're capable of influencing other nations, we would still, be doing, if not as bad as them, we would be doing some things that are only focused on our national interest. So international diplomacy is international, national interest, national sovereignty, and national honor or respect. So you want to keep those things at the forefront of your mind whenever you go into these things. So for these nations to have these small nations that are subservient and really would bend backwards at their command is an asset. It means your country, that's the very sense of colonization. That's the very sense of why nations went and conquered and enslaved people. It's just in the nature of how things happened. But we expect in this 21st century to get out of that level of codependency and acting like the master. We should have some kind of bilateral collaborative nation that honors other nations too. And if they don't see a threat, they don't show you that, right? So they don't feel like what difference does this make? And to that ambassador's point, it makes a difference because this is a nation that's going to be growing in all the facets of a nation, with its population, with its youth, with technology, with economy. This nation will grow. So making good friends and treating us well is in their best interest, but they find it more appealing to actually keep us on the leash right now. And that's all I see, right? So some of the things, like internally, when you have conflicts and there are issues with human rights, the international community's involvement in correcting those things and ratifying is part of being a global citizen, and that we are our brother's keeper. I understand that. But when it comes to the economy of a nation, to the infrastructure and how a nation grows and achieves its goals, not recognizing these things and undermining them when possible, I think is part of the 19th century and early 20th century strategy. And I don't think it's in their best interest, even though it feels like it right now.
While discussing the global governance, the G7 statement reads, in quote unquote, we recommit to the reform of the United Nations Security Council, close quote. But several leaders from Africa, including Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, were repeatedly stressing how Africa and the rest of the global South is fully represented in the council and urged the need to urgently reform the institution. Do you think the G7 nation in this statement tries to show it recognize the problem in this council based on merit?
I don't think, well, it's a good thing at least they recognize, where the question is coming from, and they're reiterating their commitment to make those changes. But one thing we can really, without any doubt, without shadow of doubt, say about the international community, and especially this groups that really control a high financial ground and military ground in the international community, and these international institutions have no problem making promises, right? So, and this has been the complaints by, Prime Minister Abiy and William Ruto of Kenya and other outspoken states, heads of states, that they've been saying, you have a very good track record of promising things, but a very bad record of keeping up with those promises and things panning out as promised. So let's just hope that this will come without a lot of political costs, because they know these promises are made as if they're going to be done of their own volition and good heart. And when time comes, there are levers, this strings that they will start to pull, saying, okay, you need to do that, you need to change this, you need to come under my thumb a little further. Hopefully they don't do that to these African nations. but at least recognizing him for being the squeaky wheel, as the saying goes, the squeakiest wheel gets oiled first, right? So they recognize that he was outspoken in complaining uh, about the situation, and they promised to fix it. So um, I'd rather have them recognize him for things that are already done on the ground that didn't re, you know that didn't that require like a lot of effort. But still, a recognition is a recognition. Any publicity is good publicity.
If this financial institutions such as World Bank, IMF, to undergo some reform, should it be due to the growing call for new financial adjustment from leaders in developing world and the subsequent formation and expansion of BRICS Bank and related institutions? Do you think that? I mean, these days there is a new call of uh, World Bank and IMF's readjustments and institutionalizing in a new form. In every big summit, we've been hearing this. Why they panicked or why they wanted to have this readjustment?
Yeah, so it's a good thing that there is some movement, because this is not something that's just currently started. African nations and generally the global South has been really sounding these concerns and pushing for readjustments and corrections uh, on how the international uh, institutions are set. Their lending practice is abhorrent. It's just unbelievable that you would actually lend a nation that is developing uh, with a much higher interest, and you would put them under such stress that they will come back begging again, and then you will give them more rope to tie themselves in your debt. And that kind of practice is birthed from the colonialist view into this neo-colonialist relationship we had, and nobody can deny it. A few years ago, a few decades ago, if you say that, it's like, oh, how dare you insult us? And now it's like, it's common understanding. These are things that have come to light, right? So, and where we are right now, that we're seeing some movement. And like I told you earlier, nobody operates outside of interest. It's all interests, right? It's not like, oh, I'm a God-fearing, loving person, so I love you so much, I'm going to help you. That's not how politics works in general, but international politics definitely is interest, either long term or short term. And with this new institutions emerging and these new relationships like BRICS being built, uh, we see a sense of urgency that some of these countries might come together and have institutions where they would be more respected and treated as partners and not beggars. Institutions where they can actually have a say in and they can be heard in. So if they start building those things, uh, now they're trying to keep things at bay and make sure that reforms are made. That's how reforms work. Reforms, work not out of goodwill and good heart. They work out of interest, and averting a more dangerous line of things escalating. So I see that there is movement wherever the movement comes from. It's long awaited. We like it. It's not MF is not going anywhere here.
We've touched many things that have been raised by this G7 nations during their meeting in Italy. They have issued this statement. As an analyst, especially, you keenly follow the political and economic dynamics of the Horn of Africa. How do you, analyze by connecting dots in this statement? What are the connotative message of this statement?
Yeah, I think I did some of it early. The major connotation out of this is we are and as it pertains to Ethiopia, because it's a huge statement that really goes around the world and addresses a lot of places. As it comes to the Horn of Africa and more specifically to Ethiopia, this statement by the G7 is mainly saying we're not that happy with the fact that you are, free ranging, that you are having other friends, and we cannot really make you do what we want you to do as much as we used to. And your funds are not entirely dependent, you're not entirely dependent on us for funds, which means we are not able to make political pressure upon you as much as we would like without making a lot of noise, of course. They still have that footage generally in the international politics. If they are interested in making something, they will do something. But without making noise quietly, we cannot pull your levers as much as we should, because now we are making new friends, new relationships, and making decisions and showing more autonomy. So that's a more frown face kind of like I'm not so happy with how you are these days kind of just simple terms. That's how they put it. And the relationship with agreement, not the agreement, memorandum of understanding with Somaliland. That's, I think, where they made the biggest mistake. I think it's a calculated mistake. They had to weigh and balance and say, we're going to have to offend somebody here. And we rather offend the ones that are more stable at this moment and make up to them if necessary, than offend somebody who is on edge from how he interacted, head of a state that interacts and acts the way they did, at Mohammed Sheikh did at the AU, is a complete embarrassment, and also something that will put you aback and say, what is going on here? This could lead to something more dangerous, because this is more volatile. So he's shown volatility, and they're saying, let's maintain some peace here by calming down the volatility. And if we show anything like middle of the road and respectful of rights, we're going to send this person who's leading this nation into, and I'm going to point this out. Thank you for reminding me, actually. They actually said in keeping the constitutional order. And that was laughable, because as Puntland is trying to pull out because of what's being done with the constitution, and they're not really happy, another state is claiming full independence and becoming its own nation on top of Somaliland. They appreciate and recognize Hassan Sheikh's government for keeping things together. That's not keeping things together. So they are giving empty praise to calm down a rather volatile and frantic, I'm not going to call nation, head of state, because as a nation, that does not represent Somalia's person, Somalia's nation, because you cannot go to Italy and say, we still have your old homes from the time of colonization. You please come back, right? That is not Somalia. Somalia is not begging the European nations to come back and colonize them, or to come back to their old land and homes and take it back. That is frantic. Coming to AU and behaving in such a way is volatile. They saw volatility and growing volatility, and they wanted to calm that down at the expense of their relationship with Ethiopia. Because they say, where is Ethiopia going to go? It's already in BRICS, so let's calm down at your expense. But that's a miscalculation, because volatility doesn't stop like that. Bullying doesn't stop like that. And when you go ahead and disrespect an independent state at the minimum, which I call a nation, Somaliland, and call it a region in Somalia, you're making you're not making the best allies in the nation, and you're not working with the calm heads as you should and recognizing their effort to common goals. So that's how I saw it. Yeah.
Ayana Feyisa, I really appreciate and highly value your time. Thank you for your expertise.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. This brings you to the end of our edition for today. See you next time with another edition. Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Bye.